They held my 8-year-old grandson under the frozen water for what felt like an eternity. When I finally pulled his blue lifeless body from that lake, something inside me shattered and then reformed into something harder, something dangerous. I made a phone call that night that would bring an entire empire crashing down. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. My name is Eleanor Walsh, though most people call me Ellie. I am 69 years old, a widow of 5 years, and until 8 months ago, I believed I understood my place in this world. I was wrong about almost everything. The unraveling started when my daughter-in-law Jessica decided I was no longer suitable company for her carefully curated life. Jessica came from what people call old money, the kind that makes you believe your surname deserves to be etched in marble. The Morrison family owned most of the commercial real estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, and behaved like they held the deed to everyone else's dignity as well. When she married my son Marcus 7 years ago, I foolishly believed that love could bridge the gap between our different worlds. That was my first mistake in a long series of them. Marcus is a good man, works as a civil engineer, earns a respectable living. But to the Morrisons, he might as well have been a street sweeper. And me, well, I spent 40 years as a pediatric nurse in Queens, raising Marcus alone after my husband died in a construction accident. In Jessica's pristine world, I represented everything she wanted to leave behind, a constant reminder that her husband came from ordinary stock. The signs appeared gradually like poison seeping into water. Last autumn, my visits with my grandson Tyler became shorter, more restricted, more conditional. "Mom, Jessica thinks it would be better if you came after lunch," Marcus would say, his voice tight with the stress of trying to please everyone. After her family leaves, of course. Always after the people who really mattered had their time. But I swallowed my pride, smiled when it hurt, and showed up during whatever narrow window they allotted me. Because that is what you do when you love someone, right? You shrink yourself down to fit into whatever space they are willing to give you. At least that is what I told myself while watching my relationship with my only grandson slowly dissolve like sugar in rain. Then came the New Year's Eve party at the Morrison compound. 25 acres of manicured perfection with a main house that could swallow my entire apartment building. Private lakes, stables, tennis courts, a guest house bigger than most family homes. Jessica had been planning this party for months, inviting Connecticut's elite, everyone with enough money and connections to validate her sense of importance. I almost refused to attend. Marcus practically begged me to come. "Please, Mom, Tyler keeps asking when he will see Grandma Ellie. Just for a couple of hours." So I put on my nicest dress, the burgundy one I had worn to Marcus's college graduation, and drove out to Greenwich in my 12-year-old Toyota. The valet actually laughed when I pulled up, not even trying to hide his contempt. The party was everything you would expect from people who mistake wealth for worth. Crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than I made in a year, waiters in white gloves, enough champagne to fill a swimming pool. I found Tyler huddled in the corner of the massive living room, looking as uncomfortable as I felt in this palace of superficiality. 8 years old and already learning that some people matter more than others based on nothing but the size of their bank accounts. "Grandma Ellie." He ran to me, and for one perfect moment everything else disappeared. Until Jessica materialized beside us in a designer gown that probably cost more than my monthly pension, wearing that particular smile that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. "Eleanor," she said, her voice pitched just low enough that nearby guests could not hear. "So glad you could make it. Tyler, sweetie, why do not you go find your cousins? They are out by the lake." She said it like she was doing me a favor, but I knew better. She wanted Tyler away from me before her important guests witnessed us together, before anyone could see the connection between her perfect family and the working-class grandmother who did not fit the image. That should have been my warning about what was coming. "Oh, Eleanor is here," Jessica's mother Victoria announced to the room like someone had just tracked dog waste across her Persian rugs. Victoria Morrison had mastered the art of making people feel unwelcome without ever saying anything overtly rude. It is a skill that takes generations of inherited wealth and zero accountability to perfect. The conversation in the room shifted immediately, the way it does when someone inappropriate enters a space meant for the right kind of people. I have dealt with people like Victoria my entire nursing career. You learn quickly how to identify the ones who think their money elevates them above common courtesy. The difference is in the hospital, I could walk away when my shift ended. Here I was trapped by my love for my grandson and my son. Victoria, I replied with my warmest smile, hiding the rage that was already building in my chest. Lovely to see you again. What I really wanted to say would have gotten me permanently banned from the state of Connecticut. But I am not foolish enough to give them the satisfaction of proving their assumptions about me. I was just telling everyone about our villa in Tuscany, Victoria continued, her voice carrying that particular frequency wealthy women use when they want to remind you of your place in the social hierarchy. Perhaps you have been to Italy, Eleanor. Do you travel much? Do I travel much? On my nurse's pension, I can barely afford to replace my aging car. But sure, let me tell you all about my European adventures. Not as much as I would like, I said carefully. I prefer to spend my resources on family. The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken judgment. Jessica appeared at her mother's side like magic, her damage control instincts kicking into high gear. Mother, did you not want to show the Hendersons your new Picasso? As Victoria glided away shooting me a look that could freeze blood, Jessica leaned in close enough for me to smell her expensive perfume. Eleanor, could you please try to remember where you are tonight? These people are crucial to Marcus's career advancement. Crucial to Marcus's career. Translation. Shut up, smile pretty, and do not remind anyone that their precious Jessica married someone whose mother empties bedpans for a living. Of course, dear, I said, keeping my voice pleasant. I will try to contain my working-class tendencies. Jessica's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, her father William joined us. William Morrison is what happens when you give a mediocre man unlimited money and zero consequences for his actions. He runs the family investment firm, which mostly seems to involve playing golf and having other people do the actual work while he takes credit. Eleanor, he boomed loud enough for half the room to hear. How is that little apartment of yours? Marcus mentioned you had to downsize after your husband passed. I downsized because Marcus and Jessica needed help with their down payment. But I was not about to share that information with William. Some family business should remain private, even when you are dealing with people who would not recognize discretion if it arrived with an instruction manual. It is perfect for my needs, I replied smoothly. Close to my volunteer work at the Children's Hospital. Volunteer work. William nodded like he had just discovered a fascinating anthropological curiosity. How generous of you to donate your time like that. Of course, some people have time to spare. Some people have time to spare. Because clearly my life was so empty and meaningless that volunteer work was just how I filled my pathetic days waiting to die. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood and excused myself to find Tyler. I found him outside by the lake with Jessica's nephews, 3 boys who had clearly inherited the family's casual cruelty. The lake was frozen solid, had been for weeks according to Marcus, but Tyler was standing well back from the edge while the other boys hurled rocks at the ice, trying to crack it. Come on, Tyler, one of them called. Do not be such a little baby. The ice is thick enough. You can walk on it. Tyler shook his head, staying where he was safely on solid ground. Good boy. I had taught him to be careful around water, told him stories about thin ice and hidden currents and how quickly things can go wrong. His father never learned to swim properly, too busy working to pay for lessons we could not afford. But I made sure Tyler knew the dangers. Grandma Ellie. Tyler spotted me and ran over, relief flooding his face. They want me to go on the ice, but you said never to trust frozen lakes. That is exactly right, sweetheart. I ruffled his hair, noting how the other boys had stopped their game to stare at us with open contempt. 3 little trust fund princes in their designer winter coats, already learning that rules were for other people, people beneath their station. The oldest one, probably around 11, stepped forward with a sneer. Are you really Marcus's mother? You look nothing like him. You look old and poor. Kids say cruel things. Sometimes they do not understand the weight of their words. But when you add in the attitude these particular kids had absorbed from their parents, innocent observations become weapons designed to wound. I said simply, keeping my voice calm. But you are so old, the middle boy chimed in. And your clothes are weird. My mom says you used to clean up old people's poop for a living. Connor, Tyler said quietly, his face flushing with shame. That is my grandma. I know who she is, Connor shot back. My mom says she is an embarrassment to the family. That is when I saw it, the flash of shame crossing Tyler's face. 8 years old and already learning to be embarrassed by his own grandmother. Already starting to internalize the toxic message that his worth was measured against his cousin's trust funds and private school educations and family connections. Your mother is partially correct, I told Connor calmly. I was a pediatric nurse for 40 years. I took care of sick children when they were scared and in pain. Saved lives. What does your mother do, Connor? Connor looked confused, like the question had never occurred to him. She does not work. She does not have to work. How fortunate for her, I said. Come on, Tyler. Let us go get some hot cocoa. As we walked back toward the house, I could hear Connor telling the other boys that Tyler's grandmother was just a nurse, like it was some kind of contagious disease. The way children echo the ugly prejudices they hear from adults who should know better. That was when I knew tonight was going to end in disaster. I just had no idea how catastrophic that disaster would become. The hot chocolate station was set up in the library, far enough from the main party that I could hear myself think without the constant din of fake laughter and empty conversation. Tyler clutched his mug with both hands, stealing glances toward the windows where his cousins were still playing by the frozen lake. Grandma Ellie, he said quietly. What is a bedpan? My heart broke a little. It is something nurses use to help patients who cannot get out of bed to use the bathroom. There is nothing shameful about it, sweetheart. Taking care of people who need help is important work. But Connor made it sound. Tyler started. Connor does not know any better, I said, though we both knew that was not exactly true. Connor knew precisely what he was doing. Children are remarkably good at absorbing adult prejudices, especially the ugly ones that make them feel superior to others. Marcus appeared in the doorway looking frazzled and stressed. Mom, there you are. Jessica is looking for Tyler. Something about a family photograph. Family photograph. But the annual Morrison New Year portrait where they would arrange Tyler with all the other grandchildren and somehow position me just outside the frame, or better yet, not include me at all. Last year I had ended up standing behind a decorative plant like hired help waiting for instructions. Can Grandma Ellie be in the picture too? Tyler asked hopefully, his voice small and uncertain. Marcus and I exchanged glances. We will see, Marcus said, which is parent speak for absolutely not, but I lacked the courage to say so directly. We made our way back to the main room where a professional photographer was setting up elaborate lighting equipment. The Morrisons do not do anything halfway, including family photos that would probably end up on holiday cards sent to people they barely knew. Jessica was directing the setup like a film director, positioning family members with military precision. Grandmother and Grandfather Morrison in the center chairs naturally. Victoria, you stand behind father's left shoulder. William behind mother's right. Children in front. She went through the entire extended family, every cousin and aunt and uncle, assigning everyone their designated place in the family hierarchy. Marcus got positioned in the back row next to Jessica's cousin, who manages one of the family's commercial properties. Tyler was placed in front with the other grandchildren, all of them dressed in coordinating outfits that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I stood off to the side waiting to see if I would be included, or if this was another one of those immediate family-only situations that somehow always excluded me. Eleanor, Jessica called out like she had just remembered I existed. Could you help Mrs. Patterson with her coat? She is having trouble with the clasp. Help with coats. That was my role in this family. Not grandmother, not family member. Just someone to handle the menial tasks beneath everyone else. I watched the photographer start taking pictures while I struggled with Mrs. Patterson's coat clasp, feeling like I was watching my family through a window, close enough to see them but forever separated by invisible barriers of class and money and social acceptability. All finished, I told Mrs. Patterson, turning back to see if there might still be time for me to join the photograph. Perfect, Jessica announced brightly. I think we captured some beautiful shots. Thank you everyone. Tyler looked around the group, then spotted me standing alone by the coat closet. "Wait," he called out, his voice carrying across the room. Grandma Ellie was not in any pictures. The room went completely silent. 25 adults and a dozen children all staring at the 8-year-old boy who had pointed out what everyone else was pretending not to notice. "Oh," Jessica said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor. We can take a few more with you included." But the damage was done. The professional setup was being dismantled. Family members were already wandering away toward the bar and the buffet tables. Everyone knew these additional photos were charity, an obligation rather than a genuine inclusion. The photographer snapped a few quick shots with me awkwardly inserted into the group, but we all understood these were not the photos that would end up framed on anyone's mantle or featured in the holiday cards. "There," Jessica said with false brightness. "All set now." Tyler slipped his hand into mine as the family dispersed. "I am sorry, Grandma Ellie." "Nothing for you to be sorry about, sweetheart," I told him, though inside I was seething. Not at Tyler but at Jessica for her calculated cruelty, at Marcus for standing there watching it happen without protest, at myself for caring so much about being included in their perfect little family portrait. "Can I show you my new video game?" Tyler asked, tugging on my hand gently. "Dad got it for me as an early birthday present." "Course, sweetheart." Anything to escape the fake smiles and designer clothing and casual cruelty for a few precious minutes. We headed upstairs to Tyler's temporary bedroom. The Morrisons had set up elaborate guest rooms for out-of-town family members staying through the New Year holiday. Tyler's room was larger than my entire living room, complete with a gaming setup that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months. "Look, Grandma," Tyler said, firing up some elaborate racing game. "You can pick any car you want and customize everything." I settled into the plush chair next to him, grateful for his easy company and genuine enthusiasm. For 30 minutes we raced digital cars around impossible tracks while Tyler explained the various features with the patience of someone who truly wanted to share something he loved with someone he trusted. "Tyler," Jessica's voice carried up the stairs like a summons. "Time to come down, sweetheart. The other children are going to watch the fireworks preparation." "Can Grandma Ellie come too?" Tyler called back hopefully. Significant pause. "I think she might be more comfortable visiting with the other adults, dear." More comfortable. But because clearly I would rather make awkward small talk with people who treated me like I was invisible than spend time with my own grandson. Tyler's face fell and I could see him starting to understand the cruel mechanics of how these social dynamics worked. How love and inclusion were rationed based on arbitrary measures of worth. "You go ahead, sweetheart," I told him, forcing brightness into my voice. "I should probably head home soon anyway." "But you just got here," Tyler protested. "I know, baby. But sometimes grown-ups have to leave parties early. Because they do not want us there," Tyler said quietly, his voice heavy with understanding beyond his years. Out of the mouths of children. 8 years old, and he already understood what had taken me decades to fully accept. I should have left then, should have kissed Tyler goodbye, found Marcus to make my excuses, and driven back to Queens with whatever remained of my dignity intact. Instead, I made the catastrophic mistake of stopping in the powder room before heading out. The bathroom was decorated like something from an interior design magazine. Marble everything, gold fixtures, hand towels that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. I was washing my hands when I heard voices in the hallway just outside, voices that clearly thought they were alone. Jessica and her sister-in-law Amanda having the kind of conversation women have when they believe no one is listening. "I just do not understand why Marcus insists on bringing her to everything," Jessica was saying. "It is so awkward for everyone involved." "She seems nice enough," Amanda replied, though her tone suggested she was just being polite. "Nice is not the point," Jessica snapped. "Look at tonight." She made that comment about spending resources on family right in front of Mother. Then she monopolized Tyler for half the evening. The poor child barely got to interact with his cousins. Monopolized. I had spent 30 minutes playing video games with my grandson. Somehow that translated to monopolizing his time because apparently my relationship with Tyler was supposed to be carefully rationed to accommodate Jessica's social calendar and her need to keep me hidden from view. Has Marcus talked to her about reducing her visits? Amanda asked. I have suggested it multiple times, Jessica said, frustration clear in her voice. But you know how men are about their mothers. He feels guilty because his father died and she raised him alone. Noble, I suppose, but not very practical for our situation. Not very practical. That is what I had become. An inconvenient reminder of Marcus's life before Jessica upgraded him to her social circle. A problem to be managed rather than a person to be valued and loved. What does she even do with herself all day? Amanda continued. Marcus mentioned she volunteers somewhere, but it is not like she has any real purpose anymore. No real purpose. 40 years of pediatric nursing, raising a son who became a good man despite losing his father young, volunteering at the Children's Hospital where I helped families navigate the terrifying world of childhood illness. But none of that counted as real purpose because I did not have a trust fund or a country club membership or a husband to define my worth. Exactly, Jessica said, her voice dripping with condescension. That is why this whole situation is so awkward. She does not really fit anywhere in our lives, but she keeps trying to insert herself. And Tyler is getting old enough to notice how different she is from the rest of the family. Different. Such a polite word for beneath us, for not good enough, for embarrassing. Maybe if you found her some activities with people her own age, Amanda suggested. Senior groups or something like that. Give her a sense of community that does not revolve around you and Marcus and make everyone uncomfortable. I've thought about that exact thing, Jessica said. There is a lovely senior center in Queens near her apartment. Much more appropriate for someone in her situation. Someone in my situation. A poor widow who had forgotten her place in the natural order of things. Who had the audacity to want a relationship with her grandson despite not meeting the Morrison family standards of acceptability. I gripped the marble countertop, fighting the overwhelming urge to march out there and tell them exactly what I thought of their conversation and their family and their poisonous values. The thing is, Jessica continued, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, I am genuinely concerned about Tyler. He is at such an impressionable age and I do not want him getting confused about family dynamics and expectations. The other children have grandparents who fit a certain standard. I want Tyler to understand what is expected of him as he grows up. What will be required of him? What is expected of him? Translation. Forget where you come from, kid. Pretend your grandmother does not exist so you can properly blend in with the trust fund babies and maintain the family image. I understand completely, Amanda said. Image matters, especially at Tyler's school. The other parents notice everything. They were discussing my grandson's private school education where appearances mattered more than character, and family loyalty was conditional on maintaining the right social status. Suddenly I understood with painful clarity why Tyler had looked so uncomfortable at the party, why he had been standing apart from his cousins by the lake. He was already learning to be ashamed of me, already internalizing the toxic message that his grandmother was something to hide rather than someone to love. The voices moved away down the hallway, but I stayed in the bathroom for several more minutes staring at my reflection in the gold-framed mirror. 69 years old, gray hair that I had styled carefully for tonight, wearing my best dress that was probably older than Jessica's marriage. When had I become someone to be hidden away like a shameful secret? When had loving my family become an inconvenience they had to carefully manage around their social obligations? I found Marcus in the kitchen discussing some construction project with his father-in-law. He looked up when I approached and I could see the question in his eyes. Had I done anything embarrassing while he was not monitoring me? I am heading home, I told him quietly. Already, he said, glancing around, probably calculating how long he would have to stay to avoid offending anyone important. But you just got here, Mom. I have been here for 4 hours, Marcus. He looked genuinely surprised, like he had lost track of time while networking with the people who really mattered. Drive carefully, Mom. The roads might be icy tonight. That was it. No, thank you for coming. No, Tyler was so happy to see you. No, when can we get together again? Just drive carefully, like I was any random guest leaving early from a party. I found Tyler in the media room watching the preparations for the midnight fireworks with his cousins, while adults stood around drinking champagne and talking about their winter vacation plans. He looked up when I approached, and his face lit up for just a moment before falling when he realized what my appearance meant. "You are leaving already?" he asked, disappointment clear in his voice. "It is getting late, sweetheart." I kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of his shampoo and trying to memorize the feeling. "But you are coming to the birthday dinner next month, right? Our house." I glanced toward Marcus, who was suddenly very interested in his conversation with William about interest rates. Jessica appeared at my elbow like she had been waiting for exactly this moment. "About the birthday dinner, Eleanor," she said with that bright smile that never meant anything good. "I hope you understand, but we have had to adjust our plans slightly. Marcus's colleagues from work are coming, and with the space constraints in their 4-bedroom house with the formal dining room that seated 12. "I understand," I said, because what else could I say in front of Tyler and all these people? "Maybe we can celebrate another time." Tyler's face crumpled with disappointment. "But Grandma Ellie, you always come to my birthday dinner." "Plans change, sweetheart. That is okay." But it was not okay, and we both knew it. I kissed him one more time, breathed in his scent trying to memorize it, and walked out of the Morrison compound knowing that something fundamental had shifted in my family. I just did not realize how drastically everything would change in less than 24 hours. New Year's Day dawned gray and bitter cold, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay in bed and hide from the world. I had been awake since 4 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, trying not to think about Tyler celebrating his birthday next month without me for the first time in his life. My phone buzzed around 11 with a text from Marcus containing photos from their morning. Tyler in his pajamas, surrounded by more gifts than most families see in a year. Big smile, but something missing in his eyes, something hollow. No mention of when I might see him again. No invitation to stop by later. I was reheating leftover soup for lunch when my phone rang. Marcus's name on the display made my heart jump with irrational hope. Maybe he had realized excluding me was wrong. Maybe they wanted me to come over after all, despite what Jessica had said. "Hey Mom," Marcus said, his voice strained. "How are you doing?" "I am fine, sweetheart." "How is Tyler enjoying his new gifts?" "He is great. Actually, that is why I am calling. He has been asking about seeing you today, and I was wondering if you would be available to take him for a few hours this afternoon. Jessica's parents are coming over for dinner, and you know how it gets with all the extended family. So I was good enough to babysit when the real family wanted him out of the way, but not good enough to be included in the actual family celebration." The bitter irony would have been funny if it did not hurt so much. "Course," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I would love to spend time with Tyler." "Great. Could you pick him up around 1? Jessica wants to get the house prepared before everyone arrives." Jessica wants. The most powerful phrase in Marcus's vocabulary these days. At exactly 1 o'clock, I pulled into their driveway. Marcus met me at the door, already dressed for company in slacks, and the sweater Jessica had probably selected for him. "Tyler is getting his shoes on," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just bring him back by 5, okay? We will probably sit down to eat around then." 5 o'clock. Just in time for me to drop him off and disappear before the real family arrived. Tyler came running down the stairs, backpack slung over his shoulder and his face bright with excitement despite everything. "Grandma Ellie, I got the coolest robot building set for New Year's. Want to help me build it?" For the next 3 hours we built elaborate robot armies in my small living room, watched a movie I had recorded just for him, and ate grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles the way he liked them since he was 3 years old. Normal grandmother things. The kind of simple quality time together that used to be taken for granted before Jessica decided I was not good enough for her family. "Grandma Ellie," he said during the movie, his voice quiet and uncertain. "Why didn't you come to the dinner last night?" The question I had been dreading since I picked him up. "Well, sweetheart, sometimes families need to keep celebrations small and manageable. But you are family too." "Yes, I am." I pulled him closer on the couch. "And nothing will ever change that, Tyler." "Nothing. Do you promise?" "Promise, baby." At 4:45 I drove him back to Marcus and Jessica's house. The driveway was filled with expensive cars, warm lights spilling from every window like something from a magazine spread. Through the front window I could see the dining room table set for 14 with elaborate centerpieces, candles lit, everyone already gathering for their perfect family dinner that I was not important enough to attend. Marcus came out to meet us, hovering by my car like he was afraid I might try to come inside uninvited. "Thanks, Mom," he said quickly. "Tyler, did you have fun?" "We always do," Tyler said, but his voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. I kissed Tyler goodbye through the car window, watching as Marcus hurried him toward the house full of people who mattered more than his grandmother did. I was halfway home when my phone rang. Unknown number, but something made me answer it. "Is this Eleanor Walsh?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes, this is Eleanor. This is Dr. Chen at Greenwich Medical Center. Your grandson Tyler was brought in by ambulance about 15 minutes ago. He is stable now, but there has been a serious accident." The world tilted sideways and I thought I might vomit. "What kind of accident?" "He fell through ice into the Morrison property lake. Near drowning. Possible hypothermia. His father listed you as an emergency contact." I was already turning the car around, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. "I am on my way." The drive back to Greenwich passed in a terrifying blur of panic and rage. Tyler had fallen through ice after I had specifically taught him never to trust frozen lakes, after he had been smart enough to stay away from the ice just yesterday. How had this happened? What had gone so catastrophically wrong in the few hours since I had dropped him off? I found Marcus in the hospital waiting room, still in his dinner clothes, his face gray with shock and guilt. Jessica was there too, along with her parents and what looked like half the dinner party guests, all of them dressed in their expensive outfits, looking severely inconvenienced by this medical emergency. "Marcus," I grabbed his arm hard. "What happened to Tyler?" The kids were playing outside after dinner. His voice cracked. "Tyler and his cousins went down to the lake and the ice gave way. He went under the water." "Where were all the adults?" I demanded. "Inside. We thought they were just having fun in the snow." "You let 8-year-old children play unsupervised near a frozen lake?" I could hear my voice rising. "In winter. In the dark. It was not supposed to be dangerous," Jessica said defensively, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "The ice has been solid for weeks. We thought it was perfectly safe." "Ice is never safe enough for children to play on without adult supervision," I said, fighting to keep control. "Do not you think we feel terrible enough?" William Morrison stepped forward, his voice cold and authoritative. "This is hardly the time for blame and accusations, Eleanor." "Is it not?" I turned to look at him. "When exactly is the appropriate time? How did he get out of the water?" "One of the other boys ran for help," Marcus said, his hands shaking. "By the time we got there, Tyler was underwater. We could not see him. Victoria dove in and pulled him out." Victoria Morrison, the woman who had made it abundantly clear all evening that I was not fit to breathe the same air as her precious family, had saved my grandson's life while I was home alone eating leftover soup and feeling sorry for myself. "Where is Tyler now?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Sue. They are warming him up slowly, checking for brain damage from oxygen deprivation," Marcus said, his voice breaking on the words brain damage. "Mrs. Walsh," a doctor appeared beside me. "You are Tyler's grandmother. He is asking for you specifically." As I followed the doctor down the sterile hospital corridor, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had not called in 3 years. A number I had saved for emergencies. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Thomas Walsh speaking." "Thomas, it is Eleanor." My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking uncontrollably. "Do what you have to do." Pause on the other end. Then his voice shifted, became harder. "What happened?" "They almost killed my grandson. I will be there in 4 hours." And that is when the real story began, when justice started its slow, inevitable approach. Tyler looked so heartbreakingly small in the hospital bed, connected to machines that beeped softly in the quiet ICU. His lips were still faintly blue and his breathing was shallow and labored, but his eyes opened when I walked in. "Grandma Ellie," he whispered, his voice hoarse from the lake water he had swallowed and the breathing tube they had inserted. "I am here, sweetheart." I took his small hand, carefully avoiding the 4-line. "How are you feeling?" "Cold," he said. "So cold. And scared." "The doctors say you are going to be just fine," I told him, smoothing his hair back from his forehead and noting how much warmer his skin felt compared to when I had first arrived. "You are such a brave boy, Tyler." "I remembered what you said about ice," he continued, tears welling in his eyes. "I did not want to go on the lake. But Connor and Ethan said I was being a baby and pushed me." My heart stopped. "What do you mean they pushed you, sweetheart?" "They said I was too chicken to walk on the ice like a real Morrison. Connor pushed me hard and I fell onto the ice. Cracked right away." He started crying harder. "They laughed when I went through. They thought it was funny until I did not come back up. They pushed him. This was not an accident. This was bullying that had escalated into attempted murder." And when I thought about Jessica's family laughing it off, calling it boys being boys, my vision went red with rage. "Did you tell your dad what really happened?" I asked gently. Tyler shook his head weakly against the pillow. "Connor said if I told the truth they would make sure I never got invited to family things again. He said his mom already thinks I do not belong with them anyway." 8 years old, and he was already being trained to accept abuse to earn his place in a family that did not want him. The same way I had been trained to smile and stay quiet while they slowly erased me from their lives. Tyler listened to me. I leaned closer, making sure he was looking directly at me. "What those boys did was wrong. Very, very wrong. And no one gets to hurt you and then tell you to keep quiet about it. Do you understand me?" "But what if they are right, Grandma? What if I really do not belong?" "You belong wherever people love you for exactly who you are," I said fiercely. "Not for what you can do for them or how you make them look. And you are loved, Tyler. So deeply loved." A nurse came in to check his vitals and adjust his 4 medication. I stepped out into the hallway to think. Through the waiting room window I could see the Morrison family still holding court, playing the role of concerned relatives for the hospital staff and other witnesses, performing their parts in this tragedy they had caused through their negligence and toxic values. My phone buzzed with a text message. "Just landed at JFK. There in 90 minutes. Keith Thomas." My older brother. The one who had left Queens 45 years ago and never looked back. Who had built something powerful and impressive out of nothing, though he had never told me exactly what that something was. We had grown distant over the decades, different worlds and different priorities. But family was family when it truly mattered. I had called Thomas because I needed someone who understood that money and power were just tools. And sometimes those tools were necessary to protect the people you loved from those who would harm them. Someone who would not tell me to forgive and forget or make peace for the sake of family harmony. Someone who would not let them get away with what they had done to Tyler. "Ellie." Marcus appeared beside me looking exhausted and defeated. "The doctor says Tyler can probably go home tomorrow if his test results stay stable." "That is good news," I said carefully. "Marcus, I need to tell you something important." "What is it, Mom?" "Tyler told me what really happened at the lake." "What do you mean?" "It was an accident." "It was not an accident," I said firmly. "His cousins pushed him onto the ice. They were bullying him, calling him names, telling him he did not belong. When he fell through, they laughed." Marcus's face went pale. "He told you that?" "He also told me Connor threatened him about telling the truth. Said Jessica's family already thinks he does not belong with them." Marcus looked back toward the waiting room where Jessica was crying prettily into a tissue while her father spoke in low, serious tones to what looked like a hospital administrator, probably already working on damage control. "Mom, I know the family dynamics are difficult, but accusing Connor of deliberately pushing Tyler, that is a very serious allegation. Is it more serious than a child nearly drowning? Course not. But if we start making accusations we cannot prove, it could destroy relationships that Tyler might need as he grows up." "You mean relationships with people who tried to kill him?" I said, my voice sharp. "Marcus, those relationships are already poisonous. They pushed your son into a frozen lake." "What do you want me to do, Mom?" he asked, his voice rising. "Blow up my marriage over something we cannot definitively prove? Accuse Jessica's family of attempted murder based on what an 8-year-old says when he is traumatized?" Before I could answer, A commotion erupted in the waiting room. Security guards were escorting a man in an expensive overcoat and perfectly tailored suit through the double doors, completely ignoring the protests of hospital staff trying to explain visiting hour restrictions. Thomas Walsh might be pushing 70, but he still commanded attention when he walked into a room. Silver hair perfectly styled, 6 feet tall, shoulders still broad, and that particular aura of quiet power that comes from knowing you can buy and sell most of the people around you without breaking a sweat. "Which one of you is Morrison?" he asked the assembled family, his voice carrying easily across the room despite not being raised. William stepped forward, puffing up with his usual self-importance and sense of entitlement. "I am William Morrison. And you are exactly Thomas Walsh, Tyler's great-uncle." Thomas's eyes swept the room, cataloging every face and every detail with the precision of someone trained to assess situations quickly. "We need to talk. Right now." "I am sorry, but this is a private family matter," Victoria interjected smoothly. "Perhaps you could call tomorrow when emotions are not running quite so high and we have had time to process." Thomas turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her take an involuntary step backward. "Lady, my great-nephew nearly died on your property while your grandchildren bullied him and pushed him onto thin ice. The only thing private about this situation is the conversation we are going to have about how you are going to make this right. Now see here," William started, his face flushing red with indignation. But Thomas cut him off with a simple gesture, one hand raised slightly. "You have got two choices, Morrison. We can handle this quietly like civilized adults, or we can handle it through lawyers and investigators and the kind of intensive public scrutiny that makes people ask very uncomfortable questions about child supervision and family dynamics and what really happened out there on that frozen lake." Thomas's smile was pleasant and absolutely terrifying. "What is it going to be?" That was when I realized my brother had not just built something successful over the past 45 years. He had built something genuinely powerful. And the Morrison family was about to discover exactly what that meant. Within 18 hours of Thomas's arrival at the hospital, William Morrison's investment firm was under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Funny how quickly karma works when you know the right people and have the resources to make things happen. I was sitting in Tyler's hospital room the next morning reading to him from one of his favorite books when Marcus burst in. His face flushed with panic and confusion. "Mom, what did you do?" he demanded. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said, looking up from the book. "Did you bring the orange juice Tyler asked for?" "Federal investigators showed up at William's office first thing this morning," Marcus said, his voice cracking with stress. "They are seizing files, computers, freezing accounts, the whole 9 yards. Jessica is absolutely hysterical. She thinks you somehow called them." "Why would she think that?" I asked innocently, though we both knew exactly why. Thomas had not wasted any time making his point clear. "Did you ask Uncle Thomas to do this?" Marcus pressed. "Did you ask your wife's father if there is anything the SEC should be investigating?" I countered calmly. "This is not funny, Mom. If William goes down, it affects everyone in the family, including Tyler's college fund that they set up for him." "Yes," I said. "The college fund. The one Jessica mentioned multiple times as Tyler's ticket to the right schools and the right connections and the right life. Amazing how money that was supposedly for Tyler's future always seemed to come with strings attached to the Morrison family name and their expectations." "Marcus," I said gently, "sit down please." He remained standing, pacing actually like a caged animal. "Cannot sit down. My wife's family is being destroyed and I need to know if you are responsible." "Your wife's family pushed your son into a frozen lake and laughed about it," I said, my voice still calm. "It was an accident, Mom." "Was it?" I folded the book carefully. "Because Tyler told me a very different story. Would you like to hear what actually happened out there?" Marcus stopped pacing. For the first time since he had rushed into the room, he actually looked at his son lying in the hospital bed. Still pale, still connected to monitors, still recovering from hypothermia and near drowning. "What did he say?" Marcus asked quietly. "That Connor and Ethan pushed him onto the ice. That they called him names and told him he was too chicken to walk on the lake like a real Morrison boy. That when he fell through the ice and went under the water, they laughed." I stood up and moved closer to Marcus. "That Connor threatened him about telling the truth afterward. Said his mother already thinks he does not belong with them anyway. Marcus sank into the chair like someone had cut all his strings. Jesus Christ. Your son was bullied and nearly murdered because of it, I said. And your first concern is protecting the people who hurt him. That is not fair, Mom. Marcus started, then stopped because we both knew it was exactly fair, exactly accurate. Kevin, I need you to understand something important. I sat down across from him. For 3 years I have watched you choose Jessica's comfort over Tyler's well-being. I have watched you exclude me from family events, minimize my relationship with my grandson, turn me into a convenient babysitter who disappears when the important people show up. Mom, I know, Marcus said miserably. I am not finished. My voice stayed level, but there was steel underneath every word. I have swallowed my pride through countless humiliations because I thought keeping the peace was more important than my dignity. I thought maintaining family harmony mattered more than standing up for myself. But when they hurt Tyler, when they nearly killed him and then tried to cover it up and silence him, that was the line, Marcus. That was the point where peace became complicity. So you called Uncle Thomas, Marcus said. The uncle I have not seen since I was in high school. The uncle who apparently has enough power to bring down an entire investment firm. I called the one person I knew who would not tell me to forgive and forget, I said. What did you tell him exactly? Before I could answer, Thomas himself appeared in the doorway. He had traded yesterday's overcoat for a more casual look, wool slacks and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, but approachable enough for a hospital visit. Morning, nephew, Thomas said with genuine warmth. How is our boy doing this morning? Uncle Thomas. Marcus stood up awkwardly like a teenager caught doing something wrong. I did not know you were still in town. Would not leave without making sure Tyler is okay and things are properly handled, Thomas said, moving to the bedside. He studied the monitors with the sharp attention of someone who had spent time around medical equipment before. Kids are resilient. He will bounce back stronger. Thomas, Marcus said carefully, there is something I need to ask you directly. Ask away, son. Did you have anything to do with what is happening to William's business right now? The investigation. Thomas turned from the monitors to look at Marcus with an expression that was both kind and absolutely unyielding. Son, I have been doing business in New York and Connecticut for 45 years. I know people. Important people. When someone hurts my family, I make phone calls. Sometimes those phone calls lead to other people making their own phone calls. Sometimes those calls lead to people asking questions that should have been asked a long time ago. So you did call the SEC, Marcus said. I called some friends who care deeply about financial crimes and protecting investors. Thomas corrected. What they chose to do with the information I provided them is entirely their business and their professional responsibility. But let me ask you something, Marcus. When your son told you his cousins pushed him into that frozen lake, what exactly did you do about it? Kevin's face flushed with shame. It is complicated, Uncle Thomas. No, son, it really is not complicated at all, Thomas said. His voice hardening slightly. Someone hurt your child deliberately. Endangered his life. You either protect him or you do not. There is no middle ground here. No complicated family dynamics that justify looking the other way. You do not understand our situation, Marcus protested weakly. I understand perfectly. Thomas moved closer to Marcus and suddenly the room felt much smaller. You married into money and now you are terrified that standing up for your son will cost you access to that money and that lifestyle and that social status. You have confused being tolerated by your wife's family with being loved and accepted by them. That is not fair, Marcus said. Fair? Thomas's voice was quiet and dangerous now. You want to talk about fair, Marcus? How about your mother spending holidays alone because you are too worried about offending your in-laws to include your own mother? How about an 8-year-old boy learning to be ashamed of his grandmother because she does not drive the right car or wear the right designer clothes or have the right social connections? How about that boy nearly dying because his cousins wanted to teach him he does not belong? You do not know what you are talking about, Uncle Thomas, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I know exactly what I am talking about, Thomas said. I know what it looks like when people mistake money for worth, when they think their zip code and their bank balance make them better than everyone else. His eyes glittered with something that might have been anger or satisfaction or both. And I know what happens when those people discover that money only protects you if you have earned it honestly and legally. What is that supposed to mean? Marcus asked. It means your father-in-law has been running a Ponzi scheme for the better part of 12 years, Thomas said flatly. It means he has stolen money from pension funds and charitable organizations and individual investors to maintain his family's lavish lifestyle. It means when this investigation is finished, the Morrison name will not be worth the paper it is printed on. That is impossible, Marcus said, his face going pale. Williams' firm manages billions in assets. Other people's billions, Thomas said, which he has been spending on houses and cars and country club memberships and private schools and elaborate parties. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look and who to ask. Grandpa Thomas. Tyler's voice was small and drowsy from the pain medication. You are here. Thomas's entire demeanor transformed instantly, the hard edges melting away as he turned to his great-nephew. Hey there, champ, he said gently. How are you feeling this morning? Better, Tyler said. Warmer. Not as scared. That is good. Thomas helped him adjust his pillows carefully. Your dad looks really upset. Is everything okay? Your dad is just worried about you, kiddo, Thomas said. Adults worry about a lot of things that do not really matter in the end. The things that matter are simple. Are you going to stay for a while? Tyler asked hopefully. As long as you need me to stay, Thomas promised. And Kevin, watching his son's face light up at his uncle's attention, watching the genuine care and protection Thomas was offering without conditions or complications, finally began to understand what he had been too afraid to see for years. Some things mattered infinitely more than money or social status or fitting in with the right people. By the third day, Tyler was released from the hospital with instructions for follow-up appointments and careful monitoring. By the third day, the story had exploded across local news. Prominent Greenwich investment firm under federal investigation for massive fraud. And by the third day, Jessica's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time. She was taking it about as well as you would expect from someone who had never faced real consequences before. I was helping Tyler get settled in Marcus's guest room, the room that had been mine during the occasional overnight visits they used to allow, when Jessica arrived. Her designer clothes had been replaced by yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes red-rimmed and wild with panic and rage. This is your fault, she said without preamble, pointing an accusatory finger at me. You called your brother and now everything is ruined. My entire life is destroyed. Jessica, Marcus warned from his position beside Tyler's bed where he had been reading to him. Not here. Not in front of Tyler. Yes, here, she whirled on him, her voice rising. Do you understand what is happening, Marcus? My father could go to prison for 30 years. My family's reputation is completely destroyed. Tyler's trust fund is gone. Our house might be seized as a criminal asset. Everything we have built together is finished. Tyler's trust fund, I said mildly, keeping my voice calm. The one that was funded by stolen money. By money stolen from innocent people's retirement accounts. Allegedly stolen, Jessica snapped. And even if the accusations turn out to be true, that does not give you the right to destroy our entire lives. I did not destroy anything, Jessica, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending not to see what was already there. Stopped looking the other way while your family hurt people. You vindictive, bitter old woman, Jessica said, her voice dripping with venom. You never liked me from the beginning. You never gave me a chance. Never accepted me. I gave you 3 years of chances. I kept my voice level though inside I was burning with rage. I smiled when you excluded me from family photos. I said nothing when you relegated me to babysitting duty while treating me like hired help. I bit my tongue when you taught my grandson to be ashamed of his own grandmother and his background. I never taught him that, Jessica protested. You taught him that love comes with conditions, I said firmly. That acceptance depends on having the right clothes and the right connections and the right amount of money in the bank. I gestured toward Tyler, who was watching this confrontation with wide, frightened eyes. Look at him, Jessica. Really look at your son. Do you see the fear in his face? The confusion. She glanced at Tyler, then quickly looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Mom is just upset, Marcus said quietly to Tyler. Everything is going to be okay, sweetheart. Is it going to be okay? Jessica laughed, a bitter sound with absolutely no humor in it. Marcus, my father is facing decades in federal prison. The house we cannot afford without family money is going to be repossessed by the government. Tyler's private school tuition for next year is gone. Everything is gone because she could not mind her own business. Tyler almost died, Marcus said, his voice stronger than I had heard it in years. Our son nearly drowned because your family's children bullied him and pushed him onto dangerous ice. It was an accident, Jessica insisted. No, it was not. Marcus stood up and moved closer to his wife. I talked to Connor yesterday, Jessica. Really talked to him without you or your parents present coaching him on what to say. And he told me exactly what happened out there. The color completely drained from Jessica's face. What did he say? That he and Ethan pushed Tyler onto the ice because they wanted to see if he was brave enough to be part of the family. That when Tyler fell through the ice and went underwater, they thought it was funny. They thought watching him drown was entertaining. Kevin's voice was shaking. Connor also told me that your mother coached him afterward to say it was an accident. Told him that if anyone asked, Tyler had slipped while they were throwing snowballs. Told him to lie about attempted murder. Silence filled the room like a toxic gas spreading into every corner. Tyler had gone very still in his bed, his eyes moving between his parents as the truth finally came fully to light. Jessica, I said more gently now. Sit down, please. I do not want to sit down, she said, but her voice had lost its anger, replaced by something that sounded like despair. Sit down anyway, I said firmly. Something in my tone made her comply. She sank into the chair by the window, looking smaller somehow, diminished. How long have you known about your father's business, Jessica? What do you mean, she said. Ponzi scheme. The stolen money. The fraud. How long have you known or suspected? Her face crumpled. I did not know exactly. Not for certain. I mean, I knew there were some irregularities, some questions from investors that seemed concerning. But Daddy said it was just bureaucratic nonsense. Regulatory harassment from people who did not understand sophisticated financial instruments. When did you first suspect something was seriously wrong? I pressed. Last year, she whispered. Maybe 2 years ago. The accountant started asking too many questions about certain transactions. Daddy had to find a new accounting firm willing to sign off on the books. Her voice was barely audible. But I hoped it would all work out somehow. You hoped you could keep living the lifestyle without asking too many hard questions about where all that money was really coming from. Yes, she said, and the word came out like a confession, broken and ashamed. I liked the life Daddy's money gave us. The house, the parties, the status. And Jessica, did you tell Marcus about your suspicions? I asked. No, she said. Could not. If he knew the truth, he might have made me choose between his values and my family. So you chose for him. You chose to protect your father's crimes over your husband's right to know he was benefiting from stolen money. From money stolen from working people's retirement accounts. It was not supposed to go on this long, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face now. Daddy said he could fix it somehow. Make the books balance again eventually. By stealing even more money from even more victims. Creating an even bigger crisis. Jessica broke then, sobbing into her hands like the child she had never really stopped being. A 34-year-old woman who had built her entire identity around her father's money and social status, and now both were gone, swept away by the consequences of choices she had been too comfortable to question. I am so sorry, she cried. I am so sorry about Tyler, about excluding you, Eleanor, about all of it. I was so scared of losing everything. I thought if I could just maintain the right image, associate with the right people, keep up the right appearances, everything would be fine. You thought you could make your shame disappear by passing it down to the next generation, I said quietly. You thought if Tyler learned to be embarrassed by his background, maybe you could forget yours. What background? Jessica looked up confused. I am a Morrison. Honey, your great-grandfather was a plumber from New Jersey who got lucky in real estate during a boom. Thomas's voice came from the doorway where he had been standing listening to the entire conversation. Your family has been pretending to be old money Connecticut aristocracy for about 45 years. It is all public record if you know where to look. That is not true. Jessica stared at him in shock. That cannot be true. Afraid it is absolutely true. Thomas stepped into the room. Angelo Morrison, born in Newark in 1924, started a small plumbing business that did well enough to buy some rental properties during the 60s real estate boom. His son William got fancy ideas about joining high society and built an entire mythology around the family name and history. Thomas shrugged. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Lots of families reinvent themselves. The problem comes when you start believing your own mythology so completely that you think it makes you better than everyone else. You are lying, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. Birth certificates do not lie, sweetheart, Thomas said. Neither do immigration records or property deeds or business licenses. I had someone pull the Morrison family history as soon as I understood what kind of people we were dealing with. Would you like to see the documentation? Jessica looked around the room at Marcus's stunned face, at Tyler's confused expression, at me sitting calmly in my chair watching her world collapse. Everyone knew. Everyone has known. I suspected, I admitted. Real old money does not work so hard to prove itself. Does not need to constantly remind everyone of their status and pedigree. So what happens now? Jessica asked, her voice small and lost and frightened. Frank answered before I could. Now you learn what it means to build a life based on something other than your father's stolen money. Now you figure out whether your marriage is strong enough to survive without the trust fund safety net. Now you decide what kind of mother you actually want to be to that boy. He gestured toward Tyler, who had been quietly absorbing every word of this devastating adult conversation. And most importantly, Thomas continued, his voice gentle but firm, now you learn to apologize properly. Not just for getting caught, but for the choices you made that led to this moment. For teaching your son that love is conditional. For nearly getting him killed because image mattered more than supervision. Jessica looked at Tyler, really looked at him. And for the first time since I had known her, she seemed to see him as an actual person rather than an accessory to her lifestyle. I do not know how to do that, she whispered. Lucky for you, I said, you have time to learn. And people who will help you if you are willing to actually change. Marcus asked for a divorce 6 days later. Not primarily because of the money, though finding out your comfortable lifestyle was funded by massive fraud certainly contributed to his decision. But because of what Jessica said when he confronted her about coaching Connor to lie. She told me it was more important to protect the family reputation than to get justice for Tyler. Marcus told me as we sat in a quiet coffee shop, both of us picking at muffins neither of us wanted to eat. When I asked her what kind of message that sent to our son, she said Tyler needed to learn that family loyalty sometimes requires difficult choices. Requires silence about abuse. Family loyalty, I said bitterly. The same phrase I have heard my entire life used to justify every cruelty, every betrayal, every time someone powerful hurt someone weaker. How is Tyler handling everything? I asked, steering the conversation toward what really mattered. Better than I expected, honestly, Marcus said. I think he is relieved that someone finally believes him about what happened at the lake. That his truth matters. Kevin rubbed his face with both hands. He asked me yesterday if he was ever going to have to pretend to like Connor again. What did you tell him? I asked. That he never has to pretend anything for anyone else's comfort ever again. Not for me, not for Jessica, not for anyone. That is a good answer, Marcus, I said. Maybe he was finally learning that protecting your child means more than just providing material security. Where will you and Tyler live? I asked gently. We can stay in the house until it gets seized as part of the criminal asset forfeiture, Marcus said. Then we will figure something out. Maybe a smaller place, simpler. Jessica is moving back in with her mother, assuming neither of them end up in prison as accessories to the fraud. Marcus's laugh was bitter. Amazing how quickly everything can change. How fast a life can fall apart. Not everything changes, I said firmly. You are still Tyler's father. I am still his grandmother. That does not change based on zip codes or bank balances or social status. I know, Mom, Marcus said. And I owe you an enormous apology. Really big one. I waited. letting him find his words and gather his courage. "I was so desperate to give Tyler the life I never had," he said finally. "The financial security, the connections, the opportunities, the sense of belonging to something bigger. But in chasing all that, I forgot the most important thing you actually gave me. Which was what I asked, though I knew. Unconditional love," Marcus said, his eyes filling with tears. "The kind that does not come with strings or conditions or requirements to be someone I am not. The kind that does not disappear when circumstances change. You loved me when we had nothing, Mom. You worked double shifts to give me opportunities. And I almost threw that away. Almost lost that for both of us. But you did not lose it," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Mistakes can be forgiven, Marcus. What matters now is what you do next. How you move forward." "I want to do better," he said. "For Tyler, for you, for myself. Will you help me figure out how?" Before I could answer, Thomas appeared at our table carrying a cup of coffee and a manila folder thick with legal documents. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already pulling out a chair. "More bad news?" Marcus asked wearily. "Actually, some good news mixed in with the complicated stuff," Thomas said. He opened the folder and pulled out several official-looking papers. First, William Morrison's plea hearing is scheduled for next month. His attorney thinks he will get 15 to 20 years if he cooperates fully with the investigation and helps them trace where all the money went. "What about restitution for all the victims?" I asked. "That is where it gets interesting," Thomas said, his smile taking on a predatory edge. Turns out William was remarkably sloppy about separating his personal assets from the business accounts. The house, the cars, the country club memberships, the art collection, all purchased with stolen money, which means they are all subject to seizure and liquidation to repay victims. "Including Tyler's trust fund," Marcus said flatly. "Including the trust fund, unfortunately," Thomas confirmed. "But here is the thing. The court has to determine which assets were legitimately earned versus which came from illegal activities. That process could take years. And in the meantime, certain family members might find themselves in very difficult financial situations." Kevin frowned. "What exactly are you getting at, Uncle Thomas?" Thomas pulled out another document. "I have been thinking about investing in some real estate development projects. Small-scale, affordable housing, mixed-use commercial spaces, that sort of thing. I will need a good construction and project manager, someone I can trust completely to oversee the work and deal with contractors and keep everything on schedule." "Construction management is not exactly my specialty," Marcus said. "You would learn fast," Thomas said. "The salary would be substantial. Enough to keep Tyler in a good public school district, maintain health insurance, maybe even start saving for college again." Marcus stared at the contract Thomas had slid across the table. "Why would you do this for me? We barely know each other." "Because 45 years ago I made the mistake of letting success and money drive a wedge between me and the people who mattered most," Thomas said, his voice softer. "I have got more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes, but I have got no children of my own. No real legacy except buildings and investment portfolios." He paused. "Your mother never stopped believing in family, even when family failed her repeatedly. Maybe it is past time I remembered what that looks like." "The job comes with one absolutely non-negotiable requirement, though," Thomas added. "Which is what?" Marcus asked. "Complete honesty about everything," Thomas said. "No more convenient omissions. No more choosing comfort over truth. No more protecting people who do not deserve protection. If you are going to work for me, I need to know you will always put genuine family first. Real family, not the kind you buy with social connections." "What about Jessica?" Marcus asked. "What happens to her in all this?" "That is her choice to make," Thomas shrugged. "She can figure out how to rebuild her life based on something other than her father's stolen money. Or she can spend the next 20 years visiting him in federal prison and feeling sorry for herself. Either way, it is her decision." "She is still Tyler's mother, though," Marcus said. "She will always be his mother." "Yes, she is," Thomas agreed. "And if she wants to be part of his life moving forward in a meaningful way, she will have to earn that privilege the same way everyone else does. By putting his needs and his well-being ahead of her own comfort and image." Marcus read through the contract slowly and carefully. I could see him processing not just the financial details but the larger implications of what was being offered. This was not just a job offer. This was a chance to rebuild his entire value system from the ground up, to become the father and son he was meant to be. "There is one more thing," Thomas said, pulling out a final document. "I have been looking into schools in your price range near the property where we will be building. Found one that is specifically designed for kids who have experienced trauma or major family disruption. Smaller class sizes, counselors on staff, real emphasis on character development rather than social status and competition." "How much does it cost?" Marcus asked. "Already covered as part of your compensation package," Thomas said. "Along with health insurance, dental, vision, and a college fund that nobody can touch except Tyler when he turns 18. Nobody means nobody, Marcus. Not you, not Jessica, not me. That money will be his alone." Marcus's hands were shaking as he signed the contract. "I do not know how to thank you, Uncle Thomas." "Thank me by being the father Tyler deserves," Thomas said. "And by being the son your mother raised you to be before you got confused about what really matters in life. Now if you will excuse me, I have a meeting with some attorneys about certain property seizures. Seems the Morrison estate might be available for purchase at a very reasonable price once the government auction happens." After Thomas left, Marcus and I sat in silence for a long moment. "Mom," he said finally, "what exactly did you tell Uncle Thomas about the Morrisons when you called him that first night?" I thought carefully about that phone call, about the rage and desperation and protective fury I had felt watching Tyler in that hospital bed while his bullies got to go home to their warm houses and their perfect privileged lives. I told him the truth, I said simply. That they almost killed my grandson and thought they could cover it up and laugh it off. That they had spent years teaching him to be ashamed of his own family and background. That someone needed to remind them that actions have consequences even for rich people. And he just decided to destroy their entire lives, Marcus said. Frank did not destroy anything, Marcus, I said firmly. He just stopped helping them hide what they had already destroyed themselves through their own choices. The lies, the fraud, the cruelty, the bullying. That was all them. Is that what this is, Mom? Marcus asked. Justice. I thought about Jessica crying in Tyler's room. About William Morrison facing decades in federal prison. About Victoria and the rest of the family learning that money could not buy them out of every problem, could not protect them from the consequences of their own actions. It is a start, I said. Justice is not always pretty. But it is necessary. The day William Morrison was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, Thomas bought the family estate at auction for 35 cents on the dollar. He had very specific plans for the property. He told me over dinner that evening at an upscale restaurant I never could have afforded on my own. Plans that would benefit a lot of people who had never had the advantages the Morrisons took for granted and then squandered. You are going to turn it into affordable housing, I guessed, watching him cut his steak with the precision of someone who had learned proper table manners late in life but learned them perfectly. Close, Thomas said. I am going to turn it into a comprehensive community center, an affordable housing complex for single parents and their children. Full daycare, after-school programs, job training, GED classes, the works. He smiled with deep satisfaction. The Morrison Family Community Center. Has a nice ring to it, do not you think? Thomas Walsh, you are a wicked man, I said. I prefer poetically just, he replied. But I will accept wicked as a compliment. To giving people exactly what they deserve. He raised his wine glass. Speaking of which, how is Jessica adjusting to her dramatically new circumstances? About as well as you would expect from someone who has never worked an honest day in her life and suddenly needs to figure out how to pay rent and buy groceries, Thomas said. Though to her credit she did get a job at a local preschool. Teacher's aide. Minimum wage. But it is honest work and she seems to be taking it seriously. And Marcus, I asked. Marcus is doing remarkably well, Thomas said, leaning back in his chair. Turns out he has got a real natural talent for project management and team leadership when he is not trying to impress people who do not deserve his respect or loyalty. He has also been taking Tyler to counseling twice a week, working through everything that happened with the lake incident and the family dynamics and the trauma. How is Tyler doing with all the massive changes? I asked. Better than anyone expected, Thomas said. Kid is resilient. And he is figuring out that losing the trust fund and the big house does not mean losing his security or his worth as a person. Marcus has been very clear about priorities. Tyler's well-being comes first. Everything else is negotiable and can be figured out. It had been 4 months since the lake incident. 3 months since William's sentencing. 2 months since Marcus and Tyler had moved into their new modest apartment, a comfortable 2-bedroom place in a good public school district. Nothing fancy or impressive, but filled with a kind of genuine warmth and love their old house had never managed to provide despite all its expensive furniture and designer decorations. "Thomas," I said carefully, "can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot," he said. "How long have you been truly wealthy? Like really seriously wealthy?" He laughed, the sound carrying genuine amusement. "What gave it away? The fact that you can buy estates at auction, or the fact that federal investigators return your phone calls within hours?" "Both actually," I said. "Would you believe me if I said it started with a food truck?" he asked. "A food truck," I repeated incredulously. "Best sandwiches in Manhattan from 1982 to 1996, Thomas said, his expression growing nostalgic. "Parked outside the financial district every single weekday. Served lunch to all the young ambitious traders and analysts who thought they were going to conquer Wall Street and get rich." "You used insider information you overheard to make investments," I said. "Nothing illegal," Thomas said quickly. "But when you feed the same people lunch every day for years, when you hear the same company names and stock tickers coming up in their conversations over and over, when you see patterns in who is buying expensive lunches and who is suddenly skipping meals because their firm is in trouble, you start to understand how markets really work. How information flows. So you turned sandwich money into what exactly?" I asked. "Real estate first," Thomas said. "Then technology investments in the 90s .com boom. Then I diversified into pretty much everything. Manufacturing, healthcare, renewable energy. Turns out I had a natural knack for seeing opportunities other people missed or dismissed. And you never told anyone in the family about your success." "Who was I going to tell Ellie?" he said. "Mom and Dad were gone by the early 90s. You were busy raising Marcus alone and building your nursing career and dealing with real struggles. I sent Christmas cards with beach vacation photos and figured everyone assumed I was doing okay. Just okay maybe. Not building an empire. More than just okay," I said. "Success is relative, Eleanor," Thomas said seriously. For 45 years I measured mine in profit margins and portfolio performance and the size of my investment returns. Then I got a phone call from my sister telling me someone had hurt her grandson. And I realized I had been keeping score completely wrong the whole time." He pulled out his phone and showed me a recent photo. Tyler and Marcus painting a fence together behind their new apartment building, both of them covered in white paint and laughing genuinely. "That is real success right there," Thomas said quietly. "A kid who is not afraid to get dirty and work hard. A father who is more concerned with his son's happiness and character than his social status. And a grandmother who taught them both what unconditional love actually looks like. That matters more than all my investment portfolios combined." Before I could respond, my own phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus asking if I wanted to come over for dinner the next evening. Tyler had learned to make homemade pizza and wanted to show off his new culinary skills to his grandmother. "You know what I realized recently?" I said, typing back my enthusiastic yes. "What is that?" Thomas asked. "I spent 3 years letting the Morrisons make me feel like I was not good enough for their family. Like I was an embarrassment they had to manage and hide. And the truth," I continued. "The truth is I was never trying to join their family. I was trying to maintain my own family. And my family was always worth infinitely more than theirs, even when theirs had more money and status and social connections." "Damn right it was," Thomas said firmly. "You want to know the funny thing?" I said. "Losing everything was probably the best thing that could have happened to Marcus and Tyler in the long run. Now Tyler knows his father will choose him over social status every single time. And Marcus remembers what it feels like to love people for who they are instead of what they can do for your image." "What about Jessica?" Thomas asked. "Any realistic chance of reconciliation there?" I thought about that question carefully for a long moment. "She calls Tyler every week now," I said. "Never misses his soccer games. Helps Marcus with pickup and drop off when his work schedule gets complicated. She is learning. That is something significant, Thomas said. It is a real start, I agreed. She is learning that being a mother means more than providing designer clothes and private school connections. And Tyler is learning that love does not disappear when circumstances change. That his mother can still love him even without all the money and status. Do you think she will ever remarry? Thomas asked. Maybe eventually, I said. But if she does, it will be because she found someone who loves her for who she actually is, not for who her father was or how much money she had access to. I smiled, thinking about the woman Jessica was slowly becoming without the safety net of family wealth. Amazing what people can accomplish when they have to rely on their own character instead of their trust fund. Thomas signaled for the check, then looked at me with an expression I could not quite read. Eleanor, there is something else I need to tell you. Something important. What now? I asked, suddenly nervous. The community center I am building on the Morrison property, he said. I want you to run it. Oversee the whole operation. Thomas I am 69 years old. I do not know anything about running community centers or managing large facilities. You know about taking care of people, he said. You know about what families need when they are struggling to survive. You know about building something meaningful out of whatever limited resources you have available. He leaned forward. Plus the position comes with a very nice apartment on the property. 3-bedroom. Plenty of room for a grandmother who wants to be close to her family. And close to the grandson she adores. I stared at him in disbelief. You bought a 25-acre estate so I could live near Tyler. I bought a 25-acre estate because someone needed to put it to better use than hosting parties for people who think their bank balance makes them special, Thomas corrected. The fact that it happens to be exactly 12 minutes from Marcus and Tyler's new apartment is just a very convenient bonus. A happy coincidence. Thomas Walsh, you are the most manipulative, scheming, wonderful brother a woman could ever ask for. I will take that as a yes to the job offer, he said with a satisfied smile. Yes to the job offer, I said, raising my wine glass to match his earlier toast. To giving people exactly what they deserve. And to family, Thomas added, his voice growing serious. The kind you cannot buy with money and cannot lose no matter how hard people try to take it away from you. As we clinked glasses, I thought about the past 4 months. All the fear and anger and heartbreak. But also the discovery that some bonds are stronger than social pressure or financial manipulation or class differences. That love, real genuine love, does not disappear when trust funds evaporate. That sometimes losing everything material is exactly what you need to find what was missing all along. The things that actually matter. 1 year later, I stood in the main hall of the Morrison Family Community Center, watching Tyler help younger children plant vegetables in the large community garden we had created. The irony was not lost on me. The same property where he had nearly drowned was now the place where he was learning to help things grow and flourish. Grandma Ellie, he called out. Dirt streaked across his cheek and genuine joy lighting up his entire face. Look how big the tomatoes are getting. We are going to have so many. Beautiful work, sweetheart, I called back, thinking about how different he looked now compared to a year ago. Confident, secure, unafraid to get messy or make mistakes or be himself. The anxious child who had worried constantly about fitting in with his cousins had been replaced by a boy who knew exactly where he belonged and who loved him. Marcus appeared beside me, followed by Jessica. Their relationship remained complicated. Officially divorced but genuinely committed to co-parenting Tyler in a healthy way. Jessica had changed more than anyone over the past year. The entitled princess with her sense of superiority had been gradually replaced by a woman learning to measure her worth in something other than her father's money and social status. How is the job at the preschool going? I asked her. Better than I ever expected, actually, she admitted. Turns out I genuinely like working with children when I am not trying to use them as social accessories or status symbols. And the apartment? I asked. Small but sufficient for my needs, she said. Tyler likes having his own room when he stays with me on weekends. And I am learning to cook actual meals instead of ordering from expensive restaurants every night. Jessica's smile was self-deprecating but genuine. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have to rely on yourself instead of your father's credit cards. Any regrets about how things turned out? I asked carefully. She considered the question seriously. watching Tyler laugh with his new friends in the garden. About the money and the big house and the country club lifestyle, not really, she said. I miss the security sometimes, the ease of it. But I do not miss the person I was when I had all that. The person who thought money made me better than other people. What do you miss most? I asked. The certainty, I guess, she said thoughtfully. When everything was decided for me. Where to live, which schools were acceptable, who we should associate with, what car to drive, what clothes to wear. I never had to figure out what I actually wanted from life. I pause. Turns out figuring that out is much harder than I expected. But also more rewarding in ways I never imagined. Thomas joined our small group carrying a clipboard and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose plans were coming together exactly as intended. How are we doing on the enrollment numbers? Marcus asked. Better than we projected, Thomas said with clear satisfaction. We have got a waiting list for the daycare program. The job training classes are at full capacity. The community garden has more families wanting plots than we have space to accommodate. I'm thinking about expanding onto the back 15 acres. More affordable housing units. Maybe some senior living apartments for older adults who want to age in community rather than isolation. Thomas glanced at me meaningfully. Might be nice to have some experienced residents who understand what it means to build something meaningful from nothing. Who know what real struggle looks like. I knew what he was really asking. Whether I would be interested in helping design and run programs for seniors who had been displaced by family dynamics or financial pressures, or simply the cruelty of aging in a society that devalues older people. People like myself who had learned late in life that starting over was possible at any age. I think that is a wonderful idea, I said. We could create real community for people who need it most. Speaking of which, Jessica said quietly, there is something I need to say to all of you. Something important. We turned to look at her, and I could see her gathering courage for whatever she was about to reveal. I have been thinking a lot about what happened that night at the lake, she said. About the choices I made and the things I taught Tyler about family loyalty and keeping secrets and maintaining appearances. Her voice was steady but heavy with genuine remorse. I realized that I was not just protecting my father's reputation when I coached Connor to lie. I was teaching my son that love comes with conditions. That acceptance requires performance and silence. That image matters more than truth. Jessica, Marcus started, but she held up a hand. Me finish, please. I want Tyler to know that what happened was not his fault in any way. That when adults fail to protect children, the responsibility lies entirely with the adults. She looked directly at me. And I want him to know that real family, the kind actually worth having, does not require anyone to make themselves smaller to fit in. Does not require shame or silence or pretending to be something you are not. That means a lot, Jessica, I said simply. It is not enough though, she said. Words are never enough by themselves. Jessica pulled out a manila envelope similar to the ones Thomas was always carrying around. I have been working with a lawyer to establish something called the Tyler Walsh Foundation. Money from the sale of my personal assets. Jewelry, art, things I could liquidate without affecting the federal investigation or victim restitution. A foundation for what exactly, Marcus asked. Anti-bullying programs in schools, Jessica said. Specifically focused on helping children from different socioeconomic backgrounds learn to respect each other rather than using family money or status as a measure of worth. Her smile was shaky but determined. It is not much. Maybe enough to fund programs in 20 schools initially. But it is something real. Something that might help other families avoid what we went through. Jessica, you did not have to do this, Marcus said, clearly amazed. Yes, I did, she said firmly. I needed to do something that would help other children, other families. And I needed Tyler to see that when we make serious mistakes we try to fix them rather than just apologizing and moving on and forgetting. Thomas took the envelope and scanned the documents inside. His expression growing impressed. This is substantial, Jessica, he said. You are talking about giving away everything you managed to keep from the asset seizure. Almost everything. Everything except what I need for basic living expenses and for Tyler's visits, she said. Turns out I do not need very much when I am not trying to maintain an image that was built on lies and stolen money and fake superiority. Anyway, I watched Tyler playing with his friends, completely oblivious to the adult conversation happening nearby, but clearly thriving in this environment where children were valued for their character rather than their family connections or bank accounts. Then I looked at his parents. Marcus, who had learned to choose integrity over social climbing. And Jessica, who was slowly, painfully rebuilding herself from the ground up into someone with actual substance. "You know what I think?" I said finally. "What is that, Mom?" Marcus asked. "I think Tyler is the luckiest boy in the world right now. Not because of trust funds or private schools or big houses with servants," I continued. "But because he has got a family that is finally learning what really matters." "What really matters, Ellie?" Jessica asked quietly. "That love is not something you earn by being perfect or maintaining the right image," I said. "That family is not about bloodlines or bank accounts or social status. That the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who show up when things get difficult, not just when things are easy and convenient." As if summoned by our conversation, Tyler came running over. His hands full of cherry tomatoes and his face glowing with pride and excitement. "Look what we picked, Grandma Ellie," he announced. "Mrs. Chen says we can make salad for everyone at lunch tomorrow." "That sounds absolutely perfect, sweetheart," I said, accepting a slightly dirt-covered tomato and taking a bite. Tastes like success." "What does success taste like?" Tyler asked with genuine curiosity. I looked around at my complicated, imperfect, resilient family. My son who had learned to choose love over status. My former daughter-in-law who was building a new life based on character rather than privilege. My brother who had used his wealth to create opportunities for people who had been overlooked and dismissed by society. "Like home," I said. "Success tastes exactly like home." Later that evening, as Thomas and I sat on the porch of my apartment watching the sunset over the community garden, he asked the question I had been expecting. "Any regrets, Ellie?" he said. "About calling me that night? About everything that happened afterward? All the destruction and pain and consequences?" I thought about the Morrisons. William in federal prison. Victoria struggling to rebuild any kind of social life without the family money to smooth her way. Connor and Ethan learning to navigate school without their sense of entitlement to protect them from consequences. I thought about Jessica working minimum wage and learning to find purpose in helping others rather than impressing them. I thought about Marcus and Tyler building a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I thought about myself running a community center at 69 years old and discovering that starting over could mean moving forward rather than just surviving. "Not one single regret," I said finally. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family is losing everything that was keeping them from seeing each other clearly and honestly. "Even if it means some people get hurt in the process," Thomas said. "Frank, those people were already hurting others," I said. "They just did not care because the others were not important enough to matter in their world." I smiled, thinking about Tyler's laughter echoing across the garden where he had once nearly died. Sometimes justice looks like punishment. Sometimes it looks like consequences. And sometimes it looks like giving people the chance to become who they were always meant to be all along. And sometimes, Thomas added, it looks like a 69-year-old woman who refuses to let anyone teach her grandson that love comes with conditions or that his worth is measured by his bank account. Especially that, I agreed. The sun set behind the trees that had once been part of the Morrison estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep purple. Somewhere in the distance I could hear children playing, families gathering for dinner, people building genuine community in a place that had once been designed specifically to exclude them and make them feel inferior. It was, I thought, exactly what justice should look like. Not revenge. Not punishment for its own sake. But transformation. The creation of something better from the ashes of something toxic. Now I am curious about you who are listening to my story, I thought. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting someone you love? Have you ever watched someone you love be hurt by people who thought they were untouchable? Comment below and let me know where you are watching from. Share your own stories. Your voice matters. Your experiences matter. And maybe together we can remind each other that love, real unconditional love, is always worth fighting for. No matter the cost. No matter who tries to take it away. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for staying until the end. I hope it reminded you that family is not about blood or money or status. It is about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you when everything falls apart. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this. Stories about ordinary people who refused to let the powerful crush them, who stood up, who fought back, who won. Because sometimes the underdog does win. Sometimes justice does prevail. And sometimes love really does conquer all.